What we've seen today with the crisis is that, well, you integrate with one provider of a capability and the provider goes down. What it means, you need to find another provider and integrate with that another provider ASAP, or your business is going down, right? Of course, providing the other provider exists. And the machine is trained to go out, figure out how to fulfill your use case, figure out who might be the best provider, maybe the cheapest, maybe the fastest, maybe whatever else criteria you might have, or working within EU or with GDPR, I don't know, and connect to that provider, do the contract, and fulfill your use case. Yes, there will be hesitant providers and companies that will be trying to fight against this.
Hello and welcome to API Resilience, a podcast where we're talking about things you can do during these difficult times to make your business stronger. I'm Mark Winberry, and I'm co-host of this podcast with Christoph Van Thoma.
Hi, Mark. So, I'm super excited about today because we've got a special guest. You know, we've always have special guests, but Zdenek Nemec is a special guest because I'm always looking for people that have like a different view on the world and that are maybe living the future already today. And I think Z is one of those people. And now he's also founder of Superface. And that's why we invited him to come and have an episode with us, because I think he's doing some really interesting stuff in the API scene. So how are you, Z?
Hey, thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Mark. I'm doing fine. I'm actually more busy than ever. So I guess that's great.
It's kind of weird, right? Like you have some people that are slowing down and taking a little break. And then some people that are so busy that it's just, there's no breathing time.
Well, it's getting crazier and crazier for me. So
yeah.
busier and busier. That's a good thing. There is a lot of going on, obviously, right now in the world, and there is a lot of new opportunities that are really exciting.
Yeah, I totally know that feeling. I thought that by not traveling, I would have more time. But that's not true. It's just more. Somehow phone calls fill up the whole day now, which is interesting. So we brought you on the podcast. Like we have our standard themes. Like one of the key goals of our podcast is to tell the stories of API teams that are doing interesting things in these difficult times, to make sure that there's continuity of the API programs. Like because we believe very strongly that APIs are crucial for business and for the future proofness of businesses. So we want to give the product owners that we work with and that are part of our community the tools and the stories that they can go with to their management to make sure that their budgets don't get frozen. So I was wondering what. Yeah, sorry.
I want to say that it's more than that. That it's really about our belief that the API programs are necessary for business continuity. And that as organizations are looking fearfully at the market, they're looking where to invest and where to trim back. And we believe very strongly that the API program is not the place to cut. So not just the self-interest of the True. API program, but the self-interest of the business.
True. Very true. Yeah, thanks for the correction, Mark. So I was picturing it completely from the insider perspective. A good catch. So, Z, do you have any stories that you've seen, something interesting that you've seen happening over the last couple of months, like to that perspective?
Definitely. Like I've seen the demand for APIs rising, and people are realizing, of course, everything is going digital now. All the teleconferencing, that's the first thing, but working from home and sending emails, all that is powered by APIs. But there is more, of course. E-commerce booming, last mile delivery, and the problems. How do I integrate with so many web shops, or maybe the other way around, the shops and trying to integrate with the delivery partners, trying to deliver their goods all around the world. So we were basically forced to move to digital a little bit more than we were, before. This is like somehow some artificial force that is pushing us towards digital, social distancing, online ordering of everything. That's pushing on the frontiers of taking what was not previously possible or thinkable doing digitally. Now it's like normal thing. Like one good story I heard was about one of the biggest insurance company here in Europe. A friend of mine had some car accident. Nobody was hurt, but basically when they were trying to assess the damage with the insurance company, he expected a real person to come, right? But instead they asked him to download the app and walk around his car, and the insurance company agent was actually snapping pictures from the app on his phone. Of course, he was not allowed to take the pictures and send them the pictures. He had to use this insurance company application, and that agent was basically remotely controlling him to walk around the car and take the pictures of the damage, right? So you know, like, would this be possible like 5-10 years ago? I don't think so.
Wow, that's I hadn't heard that story yet. That's an interesting one. That was in the Czech Republic, or?
Yes, but this is like international insurance group, like I think based in Italy or somewhere. So maybe because they are coming from the Italy, and I think unfortunately their chief officer suffered from the disease. Oh. Maybe that only has that need, but they rolled this one out, and no, you know, social distancing even in fixing these problems.
Oh wow, yeah. That's an interesting story. And was this directly driven because of Corona, or? Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah. The way, I believe so. And the same happened to me, where, you know, with the different situation, but there were no APIs involved, and I basically was about to, before this thing happened, purchase a new car, right? And then everything after has changed, even the sales of the cars, right? Like you can still physically test it, but you will never meet a real person. The person is talking to you to some telecommunication device or whatnot, and the keys are, if possibly, not physical, but handed to your phone, and you unlock your car with your phone, and et cetera, right? So when you think about it, really, it's all about these capabilities that businesses have.
Yeah.
But now we are thinking about, you know, tapping on them in a different way, in a digital way. Right. Previously, digital way was e-commerce, web presence, right? But APIs are basically bringing these capabilities anywhere you want, just, you know, outside of the browser. So that's what we are now looking at, like seeing companies looking at their capabilities, trying to bundle them as a products and deliver them digitally.
Yeah.
Or at least, you know, give you a way to exercise them or order them or use them in a digital manner other than just e-commerce website.
You know, we look at what's happening right now as there are going to be companies that don't take advantage and do not continue their digital transformation, and companies who take this as a forcing function to drive their digital transformation forward. So that insurance company adjuster story is really interesting, because that is a total digital transformation story where they're taking advantage of situation to do something that's really interesting.
Absolutely. The bottom line is, I think it didn't work on the first attempt. There was something broken, some verification code didn't arrive or something. Yeah. So they had to repeat it. But so it was not a flawless experience, but they will just iron it out. I think once you embark on this journey, there's no going back, right? Even now, a lot of people realize, working from home, that's actually a nice thing, you know, and as such, you know, not meeting physically with an agent or you know, unlocking car physically or whatever, that's, people will get used to it really quick.
It's kind of nice not being sick all the time. Also, I don't know about you, but like doing all these conferences, I was constantly just having one thing after the other, and now it's a lot better, which is interesting.
Well, to us, it gave us a lot of opportunity to focus on this new venture, the Superface project, and that's why I welcome also this opportunity. Not only that there will be more APIs as a result and more capabilities delivered digitally, but we got the opportunity to work on this new take on how the capabilities are being consumed.
Can you dive in and tell us about Superface and what you're trying to build there, because I don't think that I have a full grasp on it. I've had a brief introduction to it, and I think it will be interesting to me and our guests to understand better what it is you're trying to do.
Right, absolutely. So Superface, very simply, is a communication protocol and services and tools around it. But they are basically another layer on top of existing APIs and on top of how we communicate digitally and consume capabilities digitally. And Superface is abstracting away the technical details of those communications, so you can focus on basically three things really quick. You can find the capabilities, so the stuff you want to do, the stuff you want to buy, to want to learn, to use, to exercise. You can discover it really quick. You can then contract or buy it and consume it in a matter of milliseconds. And when I'm saying you, I'm not necessarily referring you as a person or you as a developer, but you as a machine, because Superface is now, making it. It's making possible for machines to consume capabilities digitally, to find the capabilities, to subscribe to them, and to consume them without a human intervention.
So, wow. so basically, I've been talking with a lot of people recently about democratizing developer experience. So you're also making it possible for computers to use APIs. Basically.
Absolutely, yeah. Because this is bringing historically a lot of problems. We are and we as API experts are responsible for those problems, because we represent the APIs represent a craft. And a craftsmanship is needed in order to do a good API program and design APIs well and connect them effectively and be on top of the API game, right? And this historically was the case ever since the inception of the APIs. They were handmade connections made by humans between two or more machines, right? And
I really like the analogy. Maybe you can explain that also, the way that you explained it in Paris with Mike, that it's like a switchboard, and that right now, or it used to be that telephones were like manual switches that were made, like manual connections between phone numbers, and there were like people running around with cables. And that basically, this is what we're doing today. People making connections between APIs and between machines.
And not only that, we are even designing the switchboards. For every new API, you need to design a new switchboard and then have operators, connecting the wires on that switchboard, yeah. Right? And this was historically, and it still is, causing a lot of problems and overheads. And of course, it's slow and costs a lot of money. So I was always dreaming about the world where machines can just go out, you program the machine for some concrete task, like fetch the weather information in Paris, or order me tickets to the next Lakers game, and the machine will just go out, figure out where to do it, and does it, right? So without the need of people being inside, connecting wires together, designing the switchboards, and basically being this mechanical Turks hidden inside of the APIs.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this, and we've seen an emergence of a lot of low-code or no-code solutions for businesses, so that their knowledge workers can consume APIs to implement business logic using what that's available to them from some API. But what you're talking about is a level above that. And so can you explain how a user would, are you expecting the machine itself to understand the business rules and interpret business rules?
Good question. Excellent question. So these business rules will be given by the operator, right? But operator talks to the machine in the Superface world, and in the new world, an operator or programmer talks to the machine only using the business rules and business logic, not technicalities, whether it's implemented in this way or that way, or whether the wires go here or there. That's not necessary. You just focus as an operator or programmer on the business logic, on the stuff you want to do. And more concretely, you don't even do it for a particular provider. If there are multiple providers of the use case that you are trying to take, you just do it, in the language of that use case, like send an email or send a text message or ship pallets or get me weather. You don't say, do it with this provider or that provider. That's to you somehow irrelevant. That's about commercials and legal stuff and some other non-functional requirements. But you program in your business, domain, and you don't worry about the technicalities. And the machine is trained to go out, figure out how to fulfill your use case, figure out who might be the best provider, maybe the cheapest, maybe the fastest, maybe whatever else criteria you might have, or working within EU or with GDPR, I don't know, and connect to that provider, do the contract, and fulfill your use case.
So, but how do you do this? Because this sounds an awful lot like you're somehow building the semantic web. And this has been something that's, it's now 10 years ago. I was part of the then wave of, this is going to be the next big thing. Let's annotate all our resources.
and then it never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
But Google and schema.org are still trying. They need it for their basically semantic search, right? So the idea is sound, but it's the way it was executed is tremendously complex. Nobody or very few people got or even very interested in using things or learning things like Sparkle or JSON-LD to even consume, this kind of system. So there was this kind of a chicken and egg. But yes, this is slightly related to the efforts that were made in this field. I'm just trying to make them more tangible and more approachable by modern developers, So we don't necessarily create full ontologies at Superface, but there is some sort of machine understanding to things that is needed, and we call this a semantic profile. So basically, a description, a semantical description of your use case, fetching the weather information or ordering some services.
So do you imagine that this is going to be first available for more commoditized API cases, or how do you imagine that the rollout is going to be of this kind of technology?
Well, that there's like a lot, a whole lot of different, kind of APIs. So there are those that can be really commoditized, like sending a text messages, right? There is dozens and dozens of providers, and if I tell you like, hey, you need to send SMS via an API, you pick probably Twilio because everybody knows them. They have the best marketing. They have a great developer relations program. They do hands down the best conferences and all that. So that leaves other 40 providers somehow, trying to fight against the Google search. And you cannot compete really with Twilio on the marketing money. But they might have a better service or as good a service, but a little bit cheaper. But you will never learn about them because Twilio is such a great company and they are really doing it well. So that's also where we are looking at like some markets that are already very susceptible to commoditization. But then the other hand, there are scenarios when you are in a landscape, you as a client, a consumer, you are in an API landscape that is changing a lot, like the dynamical API landscape. We had this problem with one of the biggest manufacturers on this planet, where the problem goes as this. You basically are a customer of this manufacturer, and you want to simply know the status of your vehicle. Let's say they are building a very complex, a big vehicle for you. And for them, it's a very difficult task to give you an answer because there are HR systems, there are procurement systems, there are management systems, there are God knows what manufacturing systems, there are design systems, and each of them might have some information about your vehicle being built, right? And you basically need to figure out where are all the systems, ask them the question, hey, what is the status for my manufacturing number? and harmonize the status and give it back to the users. But this is a very a very dynamic environment and very dynamic landscape with hundreds and thousands of systems that you need to ask, and the systems yesterday might be different than the systems tomorrow. So you need some dynamic way basically to program the train machine, go out, figure out where are the systems that can give you the status of this vehicle part, and report back, right? You cannot maintain this with people. Well, you can, but it's a very tedious and slow process.
So are you imagining this? I wasn't even considering the possibility of being able to use random APIs to answer ad hoc questions. But as you were just talking, I started imagining that possibility.
If I may interrupt, this is critical capability or ability of our systems, of the systems of the future, because what we've seen today with the crisis is that, well, you integrate with one provider of a capability, and the provider goes down. What it means, you need to find another provider and integrate with that another provider ASAP, or your business is going down, right? Of course, providing the other provider exists, right? But this gives this solution where you are abstracting away from the providers, gives you the resiliency in the situations like this. Like you can flip provider again if they are existing at the leisure, basically. And if things like this happen, you are at least a little bit more shielded than before, because you don't go down if they go down.
Yeah, Christoph was pointing out to me earlier, which I admitted hurt my agile, lean heart, whenever he pointed out that part of the pain that we've been experiencing through the coronavirus is that we took all of the slack out of our systems with just-in-time programs, that all of the businesses had achieved efficiencies by taking slack out of their system, and then their supply chains are disrupted by coronavirus. And what you're describing is a way that even in times like we're dealing with right now, that supply chain becomes more resilient, your words, through this type of technology.
Absolutely. And that's what consuming an API is a liability. People don't think about this way, but they really should. It's a liability. If it's an external API, it's totally out of your control. You are at the mercy today. You are mostly the mercy. Like a lot of providers, and I give this example with Twilio, are integrating with Twilio and another company just to have a backup, right? And they do, of course, this manually by working with the switchboard and connecting these wires. So very few people, when they integrate with somebody, they of course bite the bullet. They learn from the documentation and hopefully well-designed portal how to use it. They bake it up in their code, and they are basically at the mercy of this one provider, and it might affect their businesses. So this is of course also going to change. The more providers you will add to the system, the more choices you will have. And I don't see how we can manually integrate with all of the providers in 20 years time. That's just not going to happen.
So explain to me how businesses differentiate in this world, because we started off talking about the situation where something like sending an SMS is arguably a commoditizable API, and right now they're differentiating on developer experience, among other things.
Right.
In the system you're describing, where machines are making these decisions, so you're certainly right about the way I wouldn't think about, the way I've always thought about integrating with an API is that you take a dependency, and introducing dependencies you have to be very careful about. And we talk about in our developer portal development programs, we talk about the importance of establishing trust and having good trust signals in your developer portal, because you recognize
why you need the trust to jump in. Why do you need the trust? Because you cannot switch easily.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it hurts you really bad if the person or the company or the API hurts you. If they break you, it hurts you and hurts your business. And if that would be like, okay, and if you would be doing, be able in these commoditized APIs, if you would be able to flipping your APIs on whatever schedules, on Monday, Tuesday, 2 p.m., use this provider, and other than that, use that provider or whatever. And if you still need some trust. That you will definitely need trust with the Superface. You need to trust, the system and the machinery that they can figure out the best solution for you. But if we build this trust, then you kind of don't need to put so much in the trust of the particular provider.
I realized something while you were describing this now that I hadn't realized before, is that so there's been these experiments or attempts to build like the global search for APIs or the global interface for all the API interfaces.
Absolutely.
So you have Rapid API is one of them. There's, I think, programmable web to some extent. Mm-hmm. There's also Zapier and their colleague. Which one is it? It's escaping me. Doesn't matter. But basically, what you're describing is kind of like the switch from manual line connections, because it goes further. Because way in the beginning of telephone, people would make their own lines to connect to the network. Right. And then later came the telco operators that would go and build and go and lay your fiber into all the different villages to make sure that everybody would be able to be connected to the network. So what you're talking about is a shift of power from individuals or individual organizations creating their connection opportunity to like a technology that allows you to create like a telco operator for APIs kind of thing. Is that what Superface is trying to be, or is it like the protocol for it?
So this is the protocol for it. So, but when you look around, this is already happening. There are these we call it domain harmonizers or domain integrators. Right? In logistics, that's my favorite example. Mm-hmm. The biggest one in logistics, everybody knows, is Metapack. And there's, I think, 100 other integrators basically just integrating APIs of other logistic companies.
Yeah.
The same is going on in many other industries. In banking, TrueLayer, especially with PSD2. In hospitality, Impala, I don't know, Muse are trying to do their stuff. So there's you look at different domains that already have some, capabilities available through APIs, and you start seeing the pattern that there are these domain integrators trying to harmonize the offering in that domain and somehow level the playing field between the different providers.
So from a provider's perspective, they've always appreciated, and one of the reasons they invest in their API programs are not only the efficiencies that it brings to their business, but also a level of stickiness that's there.
Absolutely.
And I worked on API platforms, and we refused to let anyone wrap our APIs because we would lose that stickiness. Because
how can you refuse it? This is like trying to prevent the screen scraping. The webbot screen scraping. Of course, everybody is trying to prevent it. First question is maybe shouldn't you have an API for that? If somebody is building bots to scrape your website, maybe they would actually enjoy it to have the API to that. And so yes, there will be hesitant providers and companies that will be trying to fight against this, but I don't see how can you differentiate on some capabilities which will become the utility. Some of them might still be unique, and then you might just integrate with that one particular provider, though you still might be doing it through the Superface because that will give you some flexibility, but. Good question. And there will be some pushback from the providers, and they would like to. Of course, it's a fake stickiness though. It's like you are trying to win somebody integrating with you because that will make them wired to you, and then they can increase the prices and play around it, because otherwise you need to pay a lot of money to go to a different provider, right?
But I see somewhat of a two-sided market problem, like in the future, right? Because you'll need consumers and you'll need producers. So it sounds like the consumers are going to be the first demanding party, or like the pool market, where you can go and say like, okay, so you want to harmonize all your vendors? Superface is going to do that for you. Here's how the kind of API they need to provide us to be able to interface with us. Is that how I can imagine that is going to work? Or
that is one way to do it.
Yeah.
But then the other way is really from the supply side, from the provider side. Like how much, and Christoph, you can estimate it firsthand, how much does it cost to launch an API program?
A lot.
And, and not only how much money, but where do you find those people, how long it will take, and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, what we are doing really, like literally, Superface is reducing the cost of some integration in the best case scenario, 99.999. Like it's making milliseconds from weeks and months, right? And you can take this and go to a last provider who doesn't even have engineering team, and you can help them to get the capabilities out of their system. They don't have to spend, zillions and months on engineering and building the APIs and API programs and whatnot, just to get their capabilities out. So this might actually help people or organizations to, get capabilities out and try to sell them ASAP. And if not, then, with a low or almost no cost, just try to see if there is a customer for this capability. And don't worry about the technicalities of it, because the developer experience will be amazing, but you don't have to spend millions of euros to just get it out from your company. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't work out, then okay, try another capability you have.
Is this something like a service bus layer kind of thing, but like public to the internet?
Well, there are historically some bad feelings about this. So, I mean, a service bus the problem with service bus was that the people started putting too much logic in the bus, right? So that's how it went, or where it went all wrong. But this would be, a place to discover the capabilities and contract them and connect to them. So in a way, it is a service bus, but without the logic in it. Okay. And you ask, like, a few questions back, like how this would be different to market to programmable web or these catalogs. But my analogy or my answer here is, this is like the difference between Yahoo and Google, like manually curated catalogs versus Google. Like what we how the story ended.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting to imagine how it shifts the landscape and what it will do for the competitive positions of our, of the people that are currently stepping into this world, that are learning in this world. Like, how is differentiation going to work?
That's what Mark asked earlier, right? Like how these commoditized providers will differentiate, right? They still might start providing some capabilities that are, unique, that are next to the capability that is being commoditized. They may, of course, compete on the price or conditions or whatnot. But when you think about it, like today, API discovery is based on Google search, unless you already know the brand, right? If I'll tell you a domain you never heard of, like the best insurance API, where do you go unless you work with them, right? Like you will turn out to Google, and then you need to cater to Google search engine optimization to get a chance that people will look at your developer portal, and then it's your job to take it from there, right? But if you think about it, in this world where machines will be tasked to do stuff and figure it out and just do it, then you necessarily need to start to think and open this box of what I call machine-to-machine advertisement. There will be some sort of machine-to-machine advertisement, like equivalent of SEO. I don't know how it will look like, but I'm pretty sure that there will be some sort of advertisement for these machines some trickery, can do I don't know what, just to get first in the results, or so they pick you. I don't know what. But there will be a whole new, and there will be possibly some agencies, offering just M2M advertisement and stuff, and this goes on and on.
I think it's going to shift it. You still need trust,
Absolutely,
but it's going to be different how you're going to show that you're trustworthy. It might rely more on your history of execution than the unconscious trust signals that we're currently using. I'm also thinking, how does it work with enterprise? Because you also work for enterprise, what kind of crazy contracts and the negotiations you have to go through.
That's the crazy part. We all talk about digitalizing stuff and digital transformation, and then we are reading articles that digital transformation is failing and whatnot, and so what? Yeah, what do you do today? You Google search the API for some capability you want. Hopefully you'll get some of the providers. Hopefully you end up on a good developer portal, catered to human eye, right? And hopefully that has a decent design of API that you know how to call it. And if all that is true, then you look up, okay, how do I get my key? And then you ended up calling some salesperson and meeting them for lunch and signing some contracts 2 years later, and getting some PDFs with additional documentations, right? How is this machine-to-machine communication? There is an awful lot of this thing going on.
Yeah, I like to talk about. So one of my gripes is that people talk about APIs as products, which yes, treat them like products, but they're not a product you go buy in a shop. It's an infrastructure, and yeah, we just before we started recording, we talked about the APIs as the information architecture that is becoming the nervous network of humanity. And you said an interesting thing that it's not just about sensing, it's also about executing, but that's also how it works in the body, that you can drive your muscles from your brain through neural impulses. So I think it's something similar that we're doing, where the whole world is being coupled together. It's interesting because I think, maybe coming back to what Mark said about the taking away all the slack, I think one of the things I've been doing a lot of thinking about is what is a complexity-aware architecture? How do you build a system that is built both for resilience and for economics? How do you make something that's going to be both efficient and effective and also still resilient? And I think we've so far we have been building mostly for transactional optimization, reducing friction, reducing costs, creating one single path towards value. And I think that the future will need a lot more resilience architecture that is much more complexity aware, that is not just a complicated machine, but that is a complex system that can be adaptive. I guess that's also where Superface comes in, right?
Well, the problem we are seeing right now is the complexity is usually attempted to be solved centrally.
Yeah.
And that took us only so far, Yeah. At this point, we need to throw a lot more people than that are actually to keep going at this pace. And we cannot be solving the complexity of distributed computing and so many connections centrally. Even within one company, having a central API program works only to a certain amount, and then you just need to outsource it to divisions or whatnot. So that's what Superface is bringing. This is the autonomy of components. That's the solution to complexity problems. You have an autonomous unit. There you can handle the complexity, but you cannot really, as a human person, handle the complexity of the entire system. So just break it down. Do use some approaches like domain-driven design, and break down the domains and break down the complexity and start working autonomously. I think that's the way to solve the complexity issues.
Yeah, compartmentalization for sure, and standardized interfaces between the compartments. That's true.
Well, with Superface, you don't need to standardize those interfaces as we do it today, because they will be like the Superface is bringing this implicit harmonization of the interfaces, right? You will basically, so with a lot of our customers previously, we have done some sort of standards and guidelines or API guidelines, or how you want to call these documents, where the idea is, of course, everybody within the organization adheres to those and writes the APIs in a similar way, because they are written for humans and it's easier for them to navigate so that element is going away, because the Superface protocol is giving you this implicit harmonization. You don't have to worry about whether one API is GraphQL, the other is REST, the other is using that convention, one is using another convention. That should not be the question, at any level. These are just some implementation details, and frankly, these autonomous teams should be allowed to use whatever technology they want, as long as, of course, it's following some security practices and price policies and whatnot. But and that's what engineers like. This team want to use GraphQL, the other team want to use something different. Let them use it. Just don't try to harmonize them, even on the API level. It's just counterproductive.
So, do you still see in that future? Do you still see some need for manual integrations, or for some edge cases where it would still make sense?
Well, there, like today, right? There are, and there was recently an article circulating around. It's very good. I forgot the title. There are very, very legit use cases for manual integrations, or it's really what you need from your system. It's what the constraints are there. If you just really once a month, a year need to share one big flat file, then just please go ahead and do it. Upload it to FTP. That's a valid use case. So absolutely. I mean, would they be the most dominant ones? Probably not. But there might be still, overkill to use Superface or whatever technology comes in the future for some sort of integrations.
So I used to work on location-based services. There was always this tension between the capabilities that we would build because we knew that the services that were out there would need those. And then there were people who saw interesting use cases for those capabilities that we never planned for. And some of those use cases ended up, stressing our systems incredibly because we didn't design for that. And so I'm trying to imagine how that tension plays out in this world where the machine sees the ability to do something that the designers on the provider side did not intend. It's almost like worst case scenario, we had the equivalent of denial of service attacks against our systems from
Right.
customers.
This is good concern and valid. We see it with the GraphQL queries, right? Like you can construct a query that will kill the system because it was not anticipated. Somebody will do this kind of query, and the systems and databases are not optimized for that, and then it will just clog everything. I think the design of the Superface is prone to this because it's designed and revolves around these use cases. So you as a provider, you commit to a use case, again, send a text message or fetch the weather information, transfer money, right? So this way, you somehow promise entering the machine registry. You promise that you can fulfill this use case, right? Somebody, of course, can still misuse the use case, and then that would cause some sort of problem. But there is no escaping, even in today's API world, there is no escaping understand the users and their use cases. In the GraphQL, you need to do it just to prepare or allow some queries or disallow certain queries. In a REST world, you needed to design the resources and affordances around the REST API according to the use cases. So, whoever the provider is and whatever technology they use, at the end, it doesn't matter what matters is that they understand the use cases of people basically needing on the other side. Mm-hmm. So I think, understanding the customer's need is the all boring answer, but it's really the answer also here in this situation.
This is really some mind-bending stuff for me. I'm enjoying thinking about it.
It is definitely.
And there are more things, like, with the recent crisis, we've seen this spike of people wanting or waiting for the integrations. Like, hey, I want to integrate with somebody, or I want somebody to integrate with me. And there are this, we call it wait lists, for integrations. Like the good example would be the e-commerce platforms we see around us here and the last mile logistic providers, right? The biggest platforms, they integrate by themselves right away on their own cost, because they want to get at least a little bit of share from the biggest e-commerce platforms, right? The smaller platforms, or the smallest one, they don't get, they don't care about at all. They don't spend any time integrating with them. But these little guys, they need those logistics providers to fulfill even, whatever, just 2 shipments a week. I don't know, right? So they are now in this opposite position that they want those guys to integrate with. And this is like, I call it like API integrations war. Like, who is doing, who's taking the cost of the integration, and who is doing that integrations. And it went so far that I had a friend here. He has a little logistic company, like a small one. They're basically transport persons, and they used to have a transportation services from the airport or whatever. Basically, you order them and they pick you up and take you somewhere. Not as a taxi or Uber, but on longer distances maybe. And he told me the story that there is a domain integrator, as we discussed these domain integrators, right? Like Metapack and whatnot. But here, this was in travel industry. And they were on their wait list. They wanted this integrator of these transportation services to integrate with this, for them, a small and unimportant local company. And they were on the wait list waiting for them to integrate, praying, please integrate with us so we can get some more, basically more work, right? And the best thing about this is they could skip a line. If they could, pay them some thousands of euros, they would skip the line, they would integrate with them right away. Like, these are the basic business opportunities on all the sides, And that's the world that we are currently living in, because there are these integration wait lines on like in many domains, and people are waiting for integration. And they are just waiting because it's too expensive, error-prone, and costly, and slow, and you need to put some humans on that thing, right? So that's also something that I hope to, see different in a next decade.
That's really interesting to me, because right now the playing field, definitely in the API landscape, favors larger companies. And
absolutely.
It sounds like in this world, not only would the case where your friend who's got the transportation company wouldn't have to be waitlisted, but it also means that innovations could be surfaced much more quickly.
Absolutely.
In this type of environment.
And absolutely. And so, taking it back to Christoph, democratization of interfaces for machines, I think, and exactly what you said, Mark, to your point, like the current state of APIs favoring big players, those who were first, who had some name, who built some brand, who has some money, whatever, right? And I think Superface can actually democratize the providers consumers relationship, not just because of the machines are involved in it, but the nature of it is really, okay, forget it. Like, you had a head start, you are a big corporation, I get it. But maybe there is somebody, who can do the same thing as you, much cheaper and much better.
I think there's two areas that I wanted to maybe interject still around. One is that I imagine that for governments, this could be like a really big deal, because for them, like, democratization of capability is like probably an objective that they want to strive for and invest in themselves. And then the second question that, and the second one though is more a question, is like, how do you see, like, how is this going to impact, for example, like the banking industry, where we've seen in the last 2 years, since PSD2 became like a big thing, we've seen basically every bank in Europe needed to have APIs. It was like obligatory. PSD2 required banks to have APIs. So everybody got APIs, everybody did the compliance thing, and then people started thinking like, so what's next? And then you saw some players that were really ahead of the game, that were trying to innovate, but it still feels to me that it's like the future is very uncertain. Like nobody knows how this is going to play out. We can't really see, is there going to be like a dominant player emerging? Is it going to be like an aggregator, like what you mentioned earlier? Or how is this going to be? Is this maybe a route to keep the current diverse landscape of banking?
So banking has one big problem, and that's that problem name is a high barrier of entry.
Yeah.
You need to have a banking license, and that's that's a regulatory thing, and usually you have to solve some multi-steps with the national banks and whatnot. So there are these harmonizers, there are these domain integrators trying to harm, because of course what happened, like all the different banks took this PSD2 differently, right? They of course all fulfill the order. They did it one way or another, but the execution is like very different from bank to bank, right? So we are now seeing these domain integrators trying to harmonize some of the banking APIs, but the room for actual users of those capabilities are the room for them is very limited, because if you really want to use these banking capabilities, you basically need some some sort of banking license. And that's I think what is killing innovation and all that in this space.
But it's also like that one aspect, that the aspect you're taking is the aspect of the innovators in the space. But there's also the aspect or the viewpoint of the current players, because we get to see. So I think it was Bill Gates who said the world does not need banks; it needs banking services, which is a very interesting take. And I think that to some extent, like there's definitely been malpractices where the size and the way that banks were set up, they were able to take advantage of some asymmetries in the relationships with the people that they were dealing with. At the same time, banks are creating a lot of societal value in the world. Even the banks today, with all their, sometimes shortcomings, I think that, like, my house, we took a loan. And without a loan, we wouldn't be able to live where we live today. And or we would have to wait 30 years until we have enough money to pay for something like this. So I think I always root for those little guy, but I think the big guys are also sometimes, they're also creating value. So what is this going to do for them? Like how do you can you see a world where maybe the playing field is a little bit more evened out, but they're still, like, how do you differentiate? How do you create value in this world? What is it going to be that's where is the value going to shift? Like right now, it's shifting towards who can do integrations and who is enabling integrations. Where does it shift when integrations become cheap? Like just the same question as, I think this was at MIT, when hardware became like super, super cheap. That they asked, like, what do you do if processing power doesn't cost anything? It's like, well, maybe graphical interfaces. And I was like, oh my God, yes, this is a brilliant idea. So what is this going to do?
I can only think of analogies, and historically the one that this could be in theory bigger, but there is no other big one to compare it, is the web and e-commerce. Like what happened if every last shop in the last village in the smallest country somewhere could suddenly start selling stuff on the website, right? Like I think this is the analogy that I might be looking at if I'd be looking for the answer. So it enables for these little shops that you would probably never heard of or purchase from, now you are purchasing from them, and maybe now you like them for some reason, and you would never ever venture their way if they wouldn't be for e-commerce, and you would not find them either through some e-commerce aggregator or marketplace like Amazon or whatnot. Right?
So a longer long tail, maybe.
Possibly.
Okay.
Like really, like the barrier. What I want to do is to drastically lower the barrier for offering your capabilities if you are a business via APIs or via digital interface. And likewise, on the other way, on the other side, the effort needed to find the capability you want, a provider of that capability, and buy that capability and consume it. I just want to basically bring this as low as possible.
A lot of food for thought. I think I'm out baffled. I don't know, Mark. Do you have any further questions or?
Well, I do, but Z, you're definitely way up there on my visionary scale.
Thank you, Mark.
This is really, really awesome and fun to think about. I'm almost thinking that I want to chew on this a little while, and that maybe sometime in the future. Well, I definitely want to have another conversation in the future, but I'd like to see how this starts evolving.
Absolutely.
As I'm looking at the clock and the amount of time we've been talking, and I think we could go on for a while, but let's bring it back to, what would you given the focus of this podcast and where we've gone in this conversation, let's bring it back and, what is your advice or what do you want to leave with our listeners who are trying to figure out, how to make it through this current situation? You're seeing a lot of stuff and you've got a great view.
That's a tough advice to give, but I would say, again, and it was said, like, understand the other side, the customers, the consumers. If it's API or if it's your e-commerce or if it's your business, at the end of the day, you need to understand the use cases of the people that are buying from you, and cater to those use cases. If you are building APIs, then listen, understand. Don't build APIs for the sake of APIs. If you're talking about APIs, understand who is going to use it, why they have the need, and what is their use case for your API, and try to design your API accordingly to this, to cater to those use cases. Of course, don't fall into the fallacy of doing it for just one consumer that can, give you a very specific APIs that nobody else would like to use. But yeah.
So if someone Googles Z, they're going to come up with an awful lot. We'll put your name in the notes. And I just have to comment that, you take Prince and Madonna. They had to go by whole names, but you've got Z.
I know that was not a good idea.
You command a letter of the alphabet. That's fantastic. But how do you want people to learn more about what you're doing and follow these developments? Because I think a lot of people who listen to this are going to say, like, wow, he's talking about some really disruptive and interesting technology, and I want to keep an eye on that.
So first of all, I'm ZDNE at Twitter. So that's 4 letters, ZDNE. And you can always, learn about Superface at Superface.ai. And there is also a contact form where you can reach out to us or directly to me. So Superface.ai is a good way to go there and maybe sign up for some updates if you are that kind of person that would like to hear when machines will finally take over.
So what can our audience do in preparation of the machine world? Like, because one reaction could be like, oh, I'm freezing for Corona. Now I'm definitely freezing because this whole thing is just going to be flipped over. So what is the good precursor you can do as a company to prepare for this world?
I would say think about your capabilities. If you are a company, if you are a potential provider or supplier, think about your capabilities. And those are not necessarily products, right? Mm-hmm. You can bundle a bunch of capabilities and shape a product. But, I would suggest to to look around and think about what are your capabilities and what are the use cases from the consumer side. And don't think actually from inside out, but from outside in. So don't look at what you have and trying to put it out, but look outside what is outside and try to bring it and map it into your capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so and I guess that getting some experience with APIs can also probably help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, Zdenek, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for this.
It was my pleasure as well.
Hey, it's been fantastic to meet you and to hear from you firsthand about this exciting work that you're doing. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time as well and for listening to me. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the API Resilience Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for our latest episodes. You can contact us at podcast@pronovix.com, and until next time, be well.